Hi, my name is Baez, and I'll be doing my nonverbal communication project on the basics of nonverbal communication and the beginning stages. So, to most people, the phrase nonverbal communication refers to communication affected by means other than words, assuming words are the verbal element. When it comes to verbal and nonverbal communication, it is virtually impossible to separate the two in distinct categories. Currently, many brain researchers believe that the two hemispheres of the brain specialize in different information processing. Nonverbal messages may be processed by either hemisphere, even though the bulk of the work is probably done by the right side. Another way of defining nonverbal communication is to look at the things people study. The theory and research associated with nonverbal communication focus on three primary units: the environmental structures and conditions within which communication takes place, the physical characteristics of the communicators themselves, and the various behaviors manifested by the communicators. When it comes to body movement and position, they typically include gestures, movements of the body, so limbs, hands, head, feet, and legs, facial expressions, which could be smiles, eye behavior, so blinking or direction and length of gaze, pupil dilation, and posture. The furrow of the brow, the slump of a shoulder, and the tilt of a head are all considered body movements and positions. Specifically, the major areas are gestures, posture, touching behavior, facial expressions, and eye behavior. There are many different types of gestures, but the most frequently studied are the following: speech impediment, gestures not tied to speech, but they have a direct verbal translation or dictionary definition, usually consisting of a word or two or a phrase. Speech-related gestures directly tied to speech, often serving to illustrate what is being said verbally. These movements may accent or emphasize a word or phrase, sketch a path of thought, point to present objects, depict a spatial relationship, depict a bodily action, or serve as commentary on the event, draw a picture of a referent, and organization of the interactive process. Because verbal and nonverbal systems operate together as part of the larger communication process, efforts to distinguish clearly between the two have not been very successful. One common misconception assumes nonverbal behavior is used solely to communicate emotional messages, whereas verbal communication is for conveying ideas. Words can carry much emotion, we can talk explicitly about emotions, and we also communicate emotion between the lines and verbal nuances. Actually, nonverbal cues are often used for purposes other than showing emotion. People in conversation use eye movements to help tell each other when it is time to switch speaking turns, and people commonly use hand gestures while talking to help convey their ideas. Verbal and nonverbal signals can be at variance with each other in a variety of ways. They may communicate two contradictory messages or two messages that seem to be in conflict with one another. Two messages that do not appear to be consistent with one another are perceived, but it is more common than we realize. This happens because in some cases, it is a natural response to a situation in which communicators perceive themselves in a bind. They do not want to tell the truth, or they do not want to lie, and as a result, their frustration produces a discrepant message. Nonverbal behavior can modify or elaborate on verbal messages. When the verbal and nonverbal channels are complementary rather than conflicting, our messages are usually decoded more accurately. Some evidence suggests that complementary nonverbal signals also may be helpful in remembering verbal messages. Nonverbal behavior can also substitute for verbal messages. It may indicate more permanent characteristics, moderately long-lasting features, and relatively short-term states. Nonverbal behavior may amplify or moderate parts of the verbal message. Movements of the head and hands are frequently used to amplify the verbal message. Nonverbal behavior is also used to regulate verbal behavior. We do this in two ways: coordinating our own verbal and nonverbal behavior in the production of our messages, and coordinating our verbal and nonverbal message behavior with those of our interaction partner. We regulate the production of our own messages in a variety of ways. Sometimes we use nonverbal signs to segment units of interaction. Posture changes may mean a topic change, A gesture may forecast the verbalization of a particular idea. Pauses may help in organizing spoken information into units. Clearly, nonverbal signals are a critical part of all of our communicative endeavors. Sometimes nonverbal signals are the most important part of our message. Understanding and effectively using nonverbal behavior is crucial to our success in virtually every social encounter we experience. A list of all the situations in which nonverbal communication plays a significant role would be almost endless and would include such areas as dance, theater, music, film, and photography. Thank you.